Every city you have ever seen is engaged in a silent, ancient conversation with the ground it stands upon. We celebrate the steel and glass of our skylines, but the real architect is the earth itself. This journey into the secrets of the soil will reveal how hidden forces of rock and water have dictated the destiny of human civilization for thousands of years. You will discover why some empires thrived for millennia while others vanished almost overnight, and you will gain a powerful new lens for understanding the challenges our modern cities face today. What forgotten wisdom did ancient builders possess that we have overlooked? How can a volcano's soil feed a civilization before burying it? By the end, you will see the ground beneath your feet not as mere dirt, but as the most important map to our collective future. What story do you think the land beneath your own city is trying to tell? That family along the riverbank understood something we have largely forgotten. Their choice was not romantic, it was a matter of survival. They were reading the land like a map to the future, selecting a spot where the soil was renewed each year by the river's gentle flooding. This rich, predictable silt was the ultimate resource, a natural fertilizer that promised abundant harvests, but their assessment went far beyond just food. They also looked for clay to bake into bricks, stones for foundations, and a hilltop or a bend in the river that could serve as a natural barrier against threats. These early settlers were the first urban planners, and their blueprint was written entirely by the earth itself. Geographer Dr. Anya Sharma describes this relationship with a powerful clarity. She says the first cities were not built, they were grown. They were cultivated from the specific nutrients and stability offered by their location. This was the primordial contract. Humanity would receive the gifts of the land, fertile soil, fresh water, and building materials. In return, we would build our lives upon it, our success directly tied to our understanding of its rules. This was not a one-sided deal, but a delicate balance. A society that honored this contract, that listened to the whispers of the soil, could flourish for generations. But what happened when a civilization grew powerful enough to believe it could rewrite the terms? That is a story written in the dust of fallen empires. That delicate balance between civilization and the earth was tested most severely by the first principle of urban survival, the unyielding demand for stable ground. High on the sun-baked cliffs of Mesa Verde, the ancestral Pueblones carved their homes directly into the living rock. Their choice of sandstone was not merely aesthetic, it was a profound understanding of geology. This solid bedrock provided a foundation that could support multi-story structures, shelter them from the elements, and protect them from intruders. They were building with the mountain, not just on it, and in doing so, they secured their community for generations. The type and depth of the rock beneath a city is its silent, non-negotiable partner. It dictates the structural integrity of every skyscraper, the feasibility of every subway tunnel, and the resilience of a metropolis when the earth itself trembles. This is the principle of bedrock stability, a lesson written in both triumph and tragedy. Consider the stark contrast between two modern cities shaped by the ground they ignored. San Francisco, in its rapid expansion, built entire neighborhoods on unstable landfill, areas created by dumping earth and debris into the bay. When the Great Earthquake struck in 1906, these soft, unconsolidated grounds liquefied, amplifying the destruction and leading to catastrophic fires. Centuries earlier, the Aztecs built their magnificent capital, Tenochtitlan, on an island in the middle of a lake. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they were astounded by its beauty and complexity. But after conquering the city, They drained the lake and built Mexico City directly atop the soft, waterlogged clay of the former lake bed. Today, that same soft ground acts like a bowl of jelly during seismic events, violently shaking and magnifying the waves of distant earthquakes. The city sinks too as the water is pumped from the clay, causing historic buildings to tilt and crack. The ancient builders of Mesa Verde understood their bedrock intimately. They knew its strengths and its limits. In our modern ambition, we often believe we can engineer our way around such fundamental truths, but the ground does not negotiate. It simply is. It defines the absolute limits of our architectural dreams, a reality that the most successful cities in history have always respected. The stability of bedrock is only half the story, for beneath every city lies another, more fluid layer of destiny. Venice appears to float, a masterpiece of marble and stone defying the sea. Yet this illusion comes at a terrible cost. The city is not just threatened by rising waters from above, it is sinking into the very earth, locked in a slow-motion dance with the invisible ocean beneath its foundations. This brings us to the second geological principle, the hidden influence of the water table. This is the subterranean reservoir, the zone where the pores in soil and rock are saturated with water. Its depth and quality are the ultimate determinants of a city's lifeblood, controlling its supply of fresh water, the health of its sanitation, and its vulnerability to flooding or catastrophic subsidence. Ancient civilizations possessed a deep, almost intuitive understanding of this hidden realm. The Romans were unparalleled masters of hydrology. Their magnificent aqueducts were not just channels for water, they were precision instruments that tapped into specific, reliable aquifers, natural underground layers of water-bearing rock. They understood the source, not just the flow. This sophisticated knowledge was lost for centuries after their empire fell, plunging Europe into a period where contaminated wells and fetid rivers led to constant disease. The modern tragedy of Jakarta stands as a stark warning. The Indonesian capital is one of the fastest sinking cities on Earth, with some areas dropping by nearly 10 inches per year. The cause is not mysterious. As the city exploded in size, its public water infrastructure failed to keep pace. Millions of residents and businesses had no choice but to drill private wells, extracting groundwater from the aquifers below at an unsustainable rate. Think of the ground beneath Jakarta as a giant, waterlogged sponge. As the water is pumped out, the sponge compresses, and the ground above it collapses permanently. The city's own thirst is causing it to drown, making it more susceptible to flooding from the sea it is sinking towards. This is the paradox of the water table, a resource that gives life but demands respect. It is a silent partner in every urban story, a force we can cooperate with as the Romans did, or one we can provoke into a slow and certain revenge. But the most profound conversation between a city and its land is not written in stone or water, but in dirt. The rich, dark soil of the Indus Valley was a gift of cosmic proportions. Carried down from the Himalayas by mighty rivers, this alluvial loam was soft, deep, and incredibly fertile. It was this earth, more than any king or army, that built the Harappan civilization. Their cities, like Mohenjo-Daro, with their sophisticated grids and public baths, were not feats of architecture alone. They were the direct product of an agricultural surplus, so vast it freed a significant part of the population from farming. People could become artisans, traders, priests, and planners because the soil produced more than enough food for everyone. This is the third, and perhaps most vital, geological principle, soil composition as the engine of urban destiny. The very type of dirt surrounding a settlement dictates what can be grown. how many people can be fed, and ultimately, how large and complex a society can become. Think of soil as a living pantry. Sandy soil drains too quickly, starving plants of water. Clay soil is dense and sticky, suffocating roots. But loam, that perfect balance of sand, silt, and clay, is a gardener's dream. It holds moisture and nutrients just long enough for crops to thrive. The Harappans had loam in abundance, and their civilization flourished for centuries. Contrast this with the fate of the Maya. Their magnificent stone cities, like Tikal, rose from the lush Central American rainforest. For a time, their agricultural system, which included cutting and burning the forest to create nutrient-rich ash, worked. But the underlying soil was thin and vulnerable. After years of intensive farming, the nutrients were depleted, the soil eroded away. The land could no longer support the sprawling urban populations. A civilization that mastered astronomy and mathematics could not overcome the slow, silent exhaustion of its own foundation. The lesson is stark. A city's true limits are not set by its walls, but by the capacity of its hinterlands to keep its people fed. We face a modern version of this ancient challenge. Our global food system often treats soil like a simple substrate, not a non-renewable resource. But the same rules apply now as they did 4,000 years ago. The fate of our cities is still, and always will be, written in the earth we so often take for granted. That thin, fertile ribbon of life along the Nile was the ultimate gift of the soil. Every summer for millennia, the river would swell with rains from distant highlands, overflowing its banks and spreading a fresh layer of dark, mineral-rich silt across the floodplain. This was not just water, it was liquid fertility. When the waters receded, they left behind a perfectly prepared seedbed, a garden stretching for hundreds of miles through the heart of a desert. This annual miracle, this predictable geological rhythm, was the foundation upon which the entire Egyptian empire was constructed. The civilization's staggering achievements, the pyramids, the temples, the art, were all financed by an agricultural surplus so reliable it became the engine of history. While other cultures struggled with erratic rains or poor soil, Egypt's food supply was a near certainty. This allowed for a concentration of human effort unlike anything the world had seen. Farmers could produce far more than their families needed, which meant others were free to become full-time priests, soldiers, administrators, and of course, the builders of monuments meant to last for eternity. The pharaoh was not just a god-king, he was the chief executive of this geological enterprise. His primary duty was to manage the bounty, overseeing granaries that stored surplus grain for lean years, and coordinating the labor force that maintained the irrigation canals. The entire society was a finely tuned machine designed to harness the gift of the silt. Compare this to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Mesopotamia. Their floods were violent and unpredictable, often arriving at the wrong time for planting and destroying settlements without warning. Managing these chaotic waters required a more defensive, militaristic form of organization. Egypt, blessed with a benevolent river, could develop a culture renowned for its stability and order, a stability that lasted for 3,000 years. The lesson is profound. A generous geological cycle can be the single greatest asset a civilization will ever know, setting a golden standard for urban prosperity that is nearly impossible to replicate elsewhere. The prosperity of Pompeii was a direct gift from the mountain that would destroy it. For generations, the rich volcanic soil on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius produced grapes for legendary wines and olives for abundant oil, creating a wealthy, cosmopolitan city. The very ground was so fertile that it seemed like a permanent blessing, a reward for their presence. This short-term bounty, however, created a dangerous illusion. The Romans knew Vesuvius as a mountain, not a volcano. The concept of a long-dormant giant awakening was beyond their comprehension. They built their villas and their businesses closer and closer to its base, utterly complacent in the face of a geological threat operating on a timescale far longer than human memory. The mountain had been quiet for centuries, and in the busy rhythm of urban life, quiet is easily mistaken for safe. Then, in the year 79, the illusion shattered. The initial warning signs, the tremors and the plumes of smoke, were likely dismissed as curiosities or minor disturbances. The timeline of geology, which measures events in millennia, was about to violently intersect with the timeline of a single afternoon. The eruption was not a single event but a cascading catastrophe. First, a towering column of ash and pumice rose miles into the sky, then began to fall, a relentless, suffocating rain of gray rock that collapsed roofs and trapped people inside their homes. This was followed by the true horror: pyroclastic flows, superheated avalanches of gas and volcanic matter that raced down the mountain at hurricane speeds, instantly vaporizing everything and everyone in their path. The city was not just buried, it was frozen. The ash entombed Pompeii in a perfect, terrible seal, preserving the final moments of its inhabitants with heartbreaking clarity. We see the baker with bread still in his oven, the families huddled together, the poignant casts of bodies caught in their last seconds of life. This preservation makes Pompeii an unparalleled archaeological treasure, but it is also the most stark warning. The same geological forces that create the most fertile land on Earth are also the most violently destructive. The fate of Pompeii forces us to ask a difficult question about our own cities. Are we, in our own time, building our futures on ground we do not fully understand, seduced by short-term gains while ignoring the slow, gathering threats beneath our feet? Pompeii's fate reveals a terrifying truth, that the very earth which gives us life can also take it away in an instant. Yet some ancient cultures developed a powerful science to listen to the land long before disaster struck. This was not mere superstition, but a profound system of observation known as Geomancy. In China, this practice is called Feng Shui, which translates to wind and water. It was a method of reading the landscape to find the most harmonious place for a city, a temple, or a home. The goal was to align human habitation with the natural flows of energy, or Kai, carried by the wind and guided by water. This was not a mystical belief so much as a highly practical code for survival. A site with good Feng Shui would be protected from harsh northern winds, have access to fresh water, and be situated on stable, elevated ground, safe from flooding. It was a blueprint for sustainability written in the language of the land itself. This intuitive geological wisdom appeared independently across the ancient world. The great city of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, for instance, was laid out on a precise grid. Archaeologists believe its main streets were intentionally aligned with the prevailing summer winds, creating a natural ventilation system that cooled the bustling city centuries before the invention of air conditioning. Across the globe, the builders of the Acropolis in Athens chose their site with brilliant clarity. They did not simply pick the highest hill for defense. They selected a specific rock outcrop that offered a defensible position, a commanding view of the surrounding plain, and, crucially, access to a permanent freshwater spring within the citadel itself. This guaranteed survival during a siege. These choices reflect a holistic understanding, a recognition that a city's health depends on a complex relationship with sun, wind, water, and rock. This lost art of geomancy represents a deep, accumulated wisdom where the success of a city was measured by its integration with the environment, not its domination over it. Modern planners, armed with geological surveys and engineering data, often prioritize economic efficiency above all else. But have we lost something essential in abandoning that ancient, intuitive dialogue with the Earth? What if the oldest maps for our future are not in our databases, but written in the wind and the water? A thick, yellow smog settled over 19th-century London, a perpetual twilight born of coal, smoke, and industrial ambition. This was more than just pollution, it was a statement. For the first time in history, humanity seemed to believe it had finally broken free from the ancient rules of the land. The Industrial Revolution sparked a great divorce between the city and the soil, a fundamental shift in our relationship with the earth. Before this era, a city's location was a negotiation with its geology, a search for fertile ground, stable bedrock, and fresh water. Now, the new gods were coal, iron, and steam. A city could thrive anywhere there was a railway line or a port to import resources, no longer tethered to the capacity of its immediate surroundings. Canals were carved through the countryside, not to follow the natural contours of the land, but to defy them in the name of commerce. Hills were leveled to make way for factories, and rivers, the ancient lifeblood of civilizations, were treated as open sewers for industrial waste. The very idea of listening to the land seemed like a relic of a primitive past. This newfound power created urban environments of unprecedented scale and wealth, but they were fundamentally unstable. The ground now shook with the vibration of machinery, not tectonic plates. The air grew thick with acids that eroded stone buildings and scarred human lungs. This was a declaration of independence from the soil, a belief that technology could overcome any geological constraint. But this divorce was an illusion. The Earth's rules were not repealed, they were merely being violated on a massive scale, storing up consequences that would echo for centuries. The industrial city became a powerful but profoundly unhealthy organism, a place where short-term gain was prioritized over long-term stability, setting the stage for the environmental reckoning we continue to face today. Beneath the asphalt and pavement of any modern city lies a second, inverted metropolis. This hidden anatomy of pipes, cables, and tunnels is the true circulatory system of urban life, and its entire design is a forced negotiation with the ground. The geology does not simply suggest where to put a subway line, it dictates the very possibility. In cities like London, engineers encountered a gift from the deep, a thick, stable layer of blue clay. This material is soft enough to tunnel through with relative ease, yet strong enough to hold its shape, creating a natural tube that could be lined with bricks. This geological luck was a primary reason London could pioneer the world's first underground railway system in the 1860s, now cross the Atlantic to Manhattan. The island's backbone is a brutally hard rock called schist. Tunneling through this stone is a slow, expensive battle, requiring massive tunnel boring machines that grind forward inch by agonizing inch. The difference in cost and effort between digging through London's clay and Manhattan's schist is astronomical, a direct tax imposed by geology on every inch of progress. But the challenges do not end with subways. Every water main, every fiber optic cable, every gas line buried under a street is subject to the same unseen forces. In areas with unstable, sandy soil, pipes can shift and rupture over time. In earthquake zones, every connection must be engineered to flex and sway without breaking, a constant, costly dance with potential disaster. This hidden network is a city's greatest financial burden and its most vital organ. The ground does not care about our budgets or deadlines. It presents a set of physical realities, and the price of ignoring them is a slow decay from below, a silent infrastructure failure that can cripple a metropolis long before the skyscrapers above ever show a crack. A concrete seawall built to withstand the storms of a past century is silently overtopped by a churning gray-green surge. This is no longer an exceptional event, but a recurring headline from coastal cities worldwide. We are witnessing a fundamental shift where the slow, patient forces of geology are being supercharged by the rapid changes in our atmosphere. Climate change is not inventing new threats for our cities. It is taking the ancient vulnerabilities written into their foundations and turning the volume up to a deafening level. For a city built on a river delta like New Orleans or Bangkok, the land was always soft and prone to subsidence. Now, rising sea levels press inward from the coast, while the extraction of groundwater causes the city to sink even further from within. The historical risk of flooding is transforming into a permanent existential crisis. In mountainous regions, communities have always nestled on hillsides, aware of the potential for erosion. But as climate change fuels more intense and frequent rainfall, the water saturates the soil on these slopes, turning stable ground into a liquid avalanche. A landslide that might have been a rare disaster 100 years ago is now a seasonal threat, and beneath arid cities like Phoenix or Cape Town, aquifers that took millennia to fill are being pumped dry to support growing populations. Prolonged droughts driven by a warming planet mean these vital underground reservoirs are not replenishing. The water table, that silent partner, is not just being strained, it is being pushed toward collapse. The whispers of the soil that ancient builders heeded are now becoming screams. The geological contract, ignored during the Industrial Age, is being presented for payment with overwhelming force. The past is no longer a quiet lesson. It is a roaring prologue to the challenges every city must now face. A single shovelful of dirt in an ancient city can contain a library of forgotten time. Urban archaeologists are the detectives who read this library not in books but in the very ground beneath the modern streets. Their most important tool is stratigraphy, the simple but profound science of soil layers. Think of a city not as a single place, but as a living entity that accumulates history 1 year, 1 decade, 1 century at a time. Each human event leaves a distinct signature in the earth. A dark, ashy layer packed with charred wood tells the story of a catastrophic fire that swept through a neighborhood. A sudden, thick deposit of sand and silt, far from any river, might reveal that a massive flood once breached the city walls, leaving a carpet of sediment in its wake. A layer rich with broken pottery and animal bones paints a picture of a bustling market square, later abandoned and forgotten. The most dramatic examples of this are the tell mounds found across the Middle East. These are not natural hills but artificial mountains, built from the literal rubble of centuries. Each time a city like Jericho or was destroyed by war or disaster, new settlers would simply level the ruins and build directly on top. Over thousands of years, this cycle of construction and collapse created a layered cake of civilization, where a journey downward is a journey backward in time. By carefully excavating and analyzing each stratum, archaeologists can reconstruct the biography of a city. They can see when a society prospered, marked by layers of well-built stone and imported goods. They can pinpoint moments of sudden collapse, often visible as a band of destruction debris. They can trace how a city adapted to its environment or failed to. A shift from deep stone foundations to shallow, flimsy ones might indicate a period of poverty or social decline. The soil holds the evidence of every choice, every triumph, and every failure. The ground we walk on is not just a foundation for the future, it is the active, physical archive of our past, a record of how countless generations before us negotiated their own contracts with the earth. This slow-motion collapse is happening right now beneath the feet of millions. Bangkok is sinking, its pavements cracking as the water table falls. New Orleans is descending, its historic neighborhoods now lying below sea level. Shanghai's massive skyline exerts a colossal, unrelenting pressure on the soft sediments of the Yangtze River Delta. These are not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a global phenomenon, a modern geological reckoning playing out in real time. Primary engine of this subsidence is a simple, brutal act of extraction. Megacities require staggering amounts of water, and when surface supplies are polluted or insufficient, the solution has been to drill down, tapping into ancient aquifers. Imagine these underground reservoirs as colossal sponges made of sand and rock, holding water in their pores, as billions of gallons are pumped out for drinking, industry, and agriculture. The water that once buoyed up the sponges is removed. The pores collapse and the entire sponge compresses permanently. The ground above has no choice but to sink, inch by inexorable inch. But the problem is compounded by the sheer physical weight of the city itself. The ground beneath these metropolises was often a soft, compressible mix of clay, silt, and peat, the legacy of ancient river deltas or marshlands. It was never meant to bear the burden of countless concrete towers, asphalt roads, and sprawling infrastructure. Each new skyscraper adds another straw to the camel's back, pressing down on this already vulnerable foundation. This is the ultimate consequence of the great divorce from geological reality. We built these colossal urban centers based on economic and political logic, with little regard for the carrying capacity of the ground. The solutions we are now forced to engineer are as complex as the problem is vast. In some places, governments are trying to inject water back into the depleted aquifers, a process known as aquifer recharge, in a desperate attempt to re-inflate the collapsing sponge. It is a bit like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube, a slow and incredibly expensive undertaking. Elsewhere, the response is purely defensive. Cities are investing billions in massive seawalls and complex pumping systems to hold back the ocean that their own sinking makes more threatening. These are not elegant solutions, but last-ditch efforts to stave off disaster. They represent a belated, frantic attempt to renegotiate that primordial contract with the Earth. But we are now coming to the table with very little leverage, forced to pay a staggering price for the geological wisdom we chose to ignore. The sinking of our megacities is a powerful warning, but it is not an inevitable fate. A new philosophy of urban design is emerging, one that seeks not to conquer the ground, but to collaborate with it. This is the promise of resilient urban design, a return to the ancient contract with the Earth, but armed with modern technology. In China, a radical experiment is underway to combat both flooding and water shortages, the creation of sponge cities. The concept is elegantly simple. Instead of funneling rainwater away as quickly as possible through concrete channels, a sponge city is designed to absorb it just as a natural landscape would. This means replacing impermeable asphalt with porous pavements that allow water to seep back into the soil, replenishing the very aquifers we have drained. It means creating thousands of new parks and green roofs that act like sponges, soaking up stormwater during a deluge and slowly releasing it later. It is a complete reversal of centuries of industrial thinking, treating rainwater as a precious resource to be harvested, not a dangerous waste product to be expelled. This principle extends far beyond water management. True resilience means preserving natural floodplains instead of paving them over for lucrative real estate, allowing rivers the space they need to swell safely. It means designing buildings that dance with earthquakes rather than trying to stand rigidly against them. Engineers in seismically active zones now use base isolation systems, where a building rests on flexible bearings that allow it to sway independently of the shaking ground, absorbing the energy that would otherwise shatter its structure. This is not a fight against geology, it is a graceful partnership. We are learning to build like the ancestral Pueblones of Mesa Verde, who worked with the strengths of their sandstone cliffs, or the ancient Romans, who mastered the flow of water rather than blocking it. The goal is to create urban environments that are adaptive and flexible, capable of weathering the shocks and stresses that are an inherent part of our planet's dynamic nature. This shift from domination to collaboration is our greatest hope for building cities that are not just impressive for a century, but truly sustainable for 1,000 years to come. The price of ignoring the ground is not measured in lives alone, but in the staggering economic collapse that follows. The earthquake that struck Japan in 2011 was a geological event of almost unimaginable power, but the financial shockwave it unleashed was a man-made catastrophe. The cost of rebuilding roads, railways, and entire towns ran into the hundreds of billions of dollars, but the true economic devastation extended far beyond the initial destruction. Factories vital to global supply chains were silenced, causing production delays across the world. The subsequent tsunami crippled the Fukushima nuclear plant, leading to a nationwide energy crisis and the astronomical expense of decontamination. Property values in affected regions plummeted, tourism evaporated, and the nation's economic output contracted for years. This single event demonstrates a brutal equation. The cost of reacting to a geological disaster is infinitely greater than the cost of preparing for one. Contrast this with the foresight of investing in geological wisdom. A thorough seismic survey before building a new neighborhood might cost a few $1,000,000. Constructing a school or a hospital with base isolation technology to withstand shaking adds a mere fraction to the overall budget. Enforcing strict zoning laws that prohibit construction on known fault lines or vulnerable coastlines requires political will, but not a massive treasury. These are upfront investments, yes, but they are a form of financial insurance so powerful it can save a nation from bankruptcy. The choice is not between spending money and not spending money. It is between spending a little now with intelligent planning or spending everything later in a desperate, chaotic response. This reality has not been lost on the global insurance industry, the ultimate calculators of risk. Companies like Swiss Re and Lloyd's of London are now creating incredibly detailed geological hazard maps. They are not just looking at earthquake zones, but at soil stability, landslide potential, and coastal erosion patterns. Their premiums and even their willingness to provide coverage at all are increasingly dictated by how well a city understands and respects the ground it is built upon. For them, the secrets of the soil have been stripped of all sentimentality. They represent a simple, cold financial reality. A city that ignores its geological foundations is not just flirting with disaster, it is making a terrible investment, one that could ultimately lead to its economic ruin. The ground beneath a city does more than support its weight. It seeps into the soul of its citizens. This is the most subtle yet powerful layer of the geological contract, the way a landscape sculpts the urban mind. Consider the profound difference between a city cradled by mountains and one that sprawls across an endless plain. In a place like Innsbruck, Austria, the towering peaks are not just a backdrop, they are a constant physical presence that defines the horizon. This geography can foster an inward-looking community spirit, a sense of being a distinct group sheltered within a natural fortress. The mountains impose a limit to expansion, encouraging a denser, more interconnected urban fabric. Now picture Chicago, built on the vast, flat expanse of the North American prairie. Here, the horizon is limitless, and this openness seems to be mirrored in the city's ambition, its relentless outward growth, and its grid of streets that push toward infinity. The very layout of the land encourages a different psychology, one of boundless possibility and expansion. But the Earth's influence goes deeper than vistas. It directly shapes our deepest anxieties and our greatest strength. In Tokyo, the constant, low-level threat of a major earthquake has been woven into the cultural DNA. This is not a source of paralyzing fear, but rather a catalyst for a remarkable culture of preparedness and collective responsibility. From a young age, children participate in earthquake drills. Buildings are engineered to sway, not break. There is a shared, unspoken understanding that personal survival is tied to the community's resilience. This geological reality has forged a society that is highly organized, meticulous, and resilient in the face of potential disaster. Contrast this with the psychology of a city like Stockholm, built upon the stable, ancient bedrock of the Scandinavian shield. The ground here is profoundly solid, virtually immune to seismic tremors. This fundamental stability might cultivate a different kind of security, one that is less about preparing for catastrophe and more about confidence in long-term planning and permanence. The very character of a city, its pace, its social rhythms, and its collective anxieties are all, in part, a reflection of the ground it stands on. The land whispers not just to our buildings, but to our minds, shaping who we are by reminding us every single day of the powerful forces we live with. The sudden silence of a settlement holds a mystery deeper than any written record. In the wind-swept fjords of Greenland, the Vikings established a thriving community, complete with farms, churches, and a society that lasted for centuries. Then, around the year 1500, they vanished. For generations, historians debated the cause, pointing to conflicts with the Inuit, a decline in trade, or simply a decision to return to Iceland. But the true answer was not in any saga, it was buried in the dirt. Modern geologists arrived with a new kind of forensic tool, the soil core. They drilled deep into the earth, extracting long, vertical cylinders of sediment, a timeline of environmental history stacked in layers. By analyzing the pollen trapped in each layer, they could reconstruct the landscape of the past. Near the top, close to the time of abandonment, the pollen told a chilling story. The types of grains that indicated hardy Viking agriculture suddenly disappeared, replaced by pollen from cold-tolerant, wild Arctic plants. The soil itself revealed a rapid descent into a colder, harsher climate, a period now known as the Little Ice Age. This was not a gradual change, it was a geological verdict. The land that had once supported barley and pasture could no longer provide. The Vikings did not fail as farmers or warriors, they were defeated by a shift in the soil they could not reverse. This same geological forensics can be applied to the site of ancient battles. On a field where two armies clashed, the ground bears invisible scars. Scientists can analyze the soil chemistry, finding spikes in phosphate levels from the decomposition of thousands of bodies and the waste of massed armies and their animals. The distribution of these chemical signatures can even map the likely positions of troop lines and the epicenter of the fiercest fighting, details often lost to the propaganda and confusion of contemporary chroniclers. Geology becomes the ultimate detective, uncovering the hidden reasons behind history's great turning points, proving that the Earth itself is the most reliable and often the most silent witness to our past. The future of urban resilience may not be built with steel and concrete, but grown from the very soil itself. We are on the cusp of a new architectural revolution, one where buildings are not constructed so much as cultivated. Scientists and engineers are now looking to the ground not as a problem to be engineered around, but as a partner with its own intelligence. Imagine a structural brick that is not fired in a kiln, but grown in a mold over a week, using the thread-like roots of fungi called mycelium. This living material is not only incredibly strong and lightweight, but at the end of its life, it can be simply composted, returning its nutrients to the earth in a perfect cycle. This is biomimicry in its purest form, learning from nature's own building codes. The innovations go even deeper, literally. What if the concrete in our foundations could heal its own cracks, just like human skin heals a cut? Researchers are developing self-healing concrete by embedding it with limestone-producing bacteria. When water seeps into a crack, it awakens these dormant microbes. They feed on nutrients within the concrete and, as a byproduct, excrete calcite, a natural mineral that seals the fissure shut. This single invention could radically extend the life of our infrastructure, reducing the need for constant disruptive repairs. But the most profound shift is in how we feed our cities. The future will see the end of the separation between urban and rural. Vertical farms, built into the very fabric of skyscrapers, are already a reality. Using advanced hydroponics and soil-based aeroponics, these farms can grow crops year-round, using a fraction of the water and land of traditional agriculture. A single tower could supply fresh produce to thousands of people, drastically shortening supply chains and reconnecting city dwellers with their food source. This is the ultimate integration, turning the city from a consumer of distant landscapes into a productive, living ecosystem. This is not a distant fantasy. It is the next logical step in a relationship that began with those first riverbank settlements. We started by taking from the soil, then we tried to dominate it. The future lies in a profound collaboration, where we listen to the soil's deepest secrets and partner with its biological and mineral processes to create cities that are not just on the land but truly of it. The most innovative self-healing concrete is useless if the city planning department ignores the ground it is meant to protect. This brings us to the critical frontier of change, the realm of policy and governance. For the secrets of the soil to truly shape our future, they must be woven into the very fabric of urban law. This means making detailed geological risk assessments as mandatory for a new building permit as a fire safety inspection. It is a shift from reactive disaster response to proactive, intelligent planning. California offers a powerful blueprint. After a series of devastating earthquakes, the state implemented some of the world's strictest seismic building codes. These are not suggestions, they are non-negotiable legal requirements that dictate how deep foundations must go, how much steel reinforcement is needed, and how structures must be designed to flex and sway. The result, while not perfect, has been profound. When major quakes have struck, modern buildings constructed under these codes have withstood the shaking, saving countless lives and billions of dollars in avoided damage. The code is a living document, constantly updated as our geological understanding improves. This is the model, translating the silent language of the earth into enforceable rules that every architect and builder must follow. But it starts with education. City planners and the politicians who appoint them must be equipped with a basic literacy in geology. A zoning map should be layered over a geological hazard map, clearly marking areas of liquefaction risk, landslide potential, or unstable bedrock. Approving a new suburban development on a known floodplain should be seen not as progress, but as gross negligence. The goal is to incentivize development in geologically stable areas and make building in high-risk zones so financially and legally burdensome that it becomes the option of last resort. This is a top-down commitment to revaluing the ground, to treating it not as a blank slate for our ambitions, but as the most important stakeholder in every urban decision. The future of our cities depends on this simple yet revolutionary act, making the wisdom of the soil a mandatory part of the conversation before the first shovel ever breaks the ground. That power to read the Earth is not locked away in a university laboratory. The most important geological clues are hiding in plain sight, waiting for anyone to notice. Start with the cracks in the sidewalk or the foundation of an old building. A thin, hairline fracture is often just normal settling, but a wide, zigzagging gap that grows over time can be a silent scream from the ground below, a sign of unstable soil or subsidence. After the next heavy rain, take a walk and watch where the water goes. Does it pool in certain low spots for days, creating a miniature swamp? That low area is a map of the underlying topography, a place where the ground has compacted or sunk, unable to drain properly. These are not just minor inconveniences, they are messages. Even the stones used in your city's oldest buildings tell a story. The rough, gray granite of a century-old library or the smooth, red sandstone of a church, these materials were almost certainly quarried locally. They are pieces of the regional bedrock, a direct connection to the deep geological history right beneath your feet. By learning to identify these local rocks, you begin to see the city not as separate from the land, but as an extension of it. This awareness is the first step toward becoming a citizen scientist. Around the world, community projects are turning everyday observations into powerful data. People are using simple measuring apps on their phones to track the widening of cracks in their homes over months, contributing to a crowdsourced map of subsidence. Others are testing the water quality in urban streams, monitoring for pollutants that seep from the very ground we have paved over. This collective effort creates a detailed, hyper-local picture of the urban environment that satellites and official surveys can easily miss. When a community can present this data, it transforms them from passive residents into informed advocates. They can ask developers tough questions about soil stability reports, demand better drainage infrastructure from City Hall, and push for the preservation of natural floodplains that protect their neighborhoods. This is how the secrets of the soil become a tool for empowerment, reconnecting us to the hidden landscape that shapes our safety, our health, and our future. This moral dimension of city building forces us to confront a difficult truth. Every new suburb, every industrial park, represents a choice to seal a piece of the earth beneath concrete. When that land is prime agricultural soil, the choice carries a profound weight. The rich, dark loam of the American Midwest, for instance, is a geological inheritance that took millennia to form. Paving over it for a shopping mall is not just a change in land use, it is the irreversible consumption of a non-renewable resource. The question is not merely one of space, but of food security for future generations. We are effectively trading long-term sustenance for short-term expansion, a bargain whose true cost may not come due until it is too late to reverse. The ethical calculus becomes even more complex when the land holds deep cultural and spiritual significance. For many indigenous communities, the connection to a specific place is not a matter of ownership, but of identity. A mountain is not a pile of rock to be quarried, it is a sacred ancestor. A river is not a channel for water, it is a living relative. When urban expansion encroaches on these sites, it does more than displace people. It severs a vital link to history, memory, and the sacred. The decision to build a dam or a highway becomes a violent act of cultural erasure, a declaration that one relationship with the land is more valid than another. This is the ultimate challenge of modern urban planning, to move beyond seeing land as a blank slate for development and to recognize it as a complex entity with ecological, agricultural, and cultural dimensions. The most progressive cities are beginning to integrate this wisdom, creating green belts that protect fertile farmland from sprawl and formally recognizing the sacred sites of First Nations peoples within their urban plans. These are not just gestures of goodwill, they are essential steps toward a more honest and sustainable relationship with the ground we all share. A child playing in a city park digs her hands into the dirt, and in that simple act, she is connecting with an invisible world that directly shapes her health. The ground beneath our feet is not an inert backdrop. It is a living, breathing ecosystem teeming with billions of microorganisms. This urban microbiome, the unique community of bacteria and fungi in city soil, has a profound and surprising conversation with our own bodies. The science is revealing a truth we once knew instinctively, that the fate of the soil and the fate of our immune systems are one and the same. When we pave over green spaces, we are not just covering dirt, we are severing a vital link in our biological defense system. Studies show that exposure to the diverse bacteria in healthy soil, especially in childhood, acts as a natural trainer for the immune system. It teaches our bodies to distinguish between harmless substances and genuine threats, potentially reducing the risk of allergies and autoimmune diseases. A park, therefore, is far more than a place for recreation. It is an outdoor pharmacy, dispensing invisible but essential medicine with every breath of dusty air and every touch of the earth. But this relationship has a dark side. The same soil that can nurture our health can also poison it if we neglect its condition. In many older industrial cities, the ground holds a toxic legacy from a century of leaded gasoline and lead-based paint. This heavy metal does not break down, it persists in the soil for generations. When children play in contaminated dirt, they ingest invisible particles, and the lead enters their bloodstream, acting as a potent neurotoxin that can cause irreversible developmental damage. The soil becomes a silent vector for disease, a stark reminder that the urban ground absorbs the consequences of our industrial past. This is why soil remediation, the process of cleaning polluted land, is not merely an environmental cleanup project. It is a form of preventative medicine, a direct intervention to protect the neurological health of an entire community. The decision to test the soil in a playground and replace it with clean earth is as crucial to public health as vaccinating children or ensuring a clean water supply. This interconnected fate makes the expansion of urban green spaces a matter of urgent public health policy, not just urban aesthetics. Planting trees and creating community gardens does more than beautify a neighborhood. It actively cultivates a healthier urban microbiome. These green lungs introduce a greater diversity of beneficial microbes into the environment, which can help counteract the effects of pollution and even break down some chemical contaminants. The presence of robust plant life also stabilizes the soil, preventing toxic dust from becoming airborne and inhaled. Cities that invest in greening are, in effect, investing in their citizens' biological resilience. They are creating a living infrastructure that filters the air, cools the streets, and most importantly, nourishes the human immune system from the ground up. The health of a city's population can be measured not just in hospital beds, but in the richness of the bacteria in its parklands. Our physical well-being is quite literally rooted in the earth. A new era of geological vision is emerging, giving us the ability to see through the earth itself. Where ancient builders relied on intuition and generations of observation, we now deploy silent fleets of drones equipped with LIDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. These aircraft fly over dense forests or urban sprawl, firing millions of laser pulses toward the ground. By measuring the precise time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, they can create a stunningly accurate three-dimensional map of the surface topography, effectively digitally stripping away all the vegetation and buildings to reveal the bare earth beneath. This technology has uncovered lost cities in the jungles of Cambodia, but its power for modern planning is even more profound. It can reveal the subtle, hidden contours of a landscape, showing exactly where water will flow during a storm, or identifying ancient, unstable landslide slopes that are completely invisible to the naked eye. Beyond mapping the surface, we can now peer deep into the ground without ever breaking it. Ground-penetrating radar works like an ultrasound for the Earth. A device sends high-frequency radio waves into the soil, and as these waves hit different materials, they bounce back with a unique signature. A buried river channel, long ago paved over, will reflect the waves differently than the surrounding clay. A hidden fault line, a fracture in the bedrock that could one day slip, creates a distinct pattern in the data. This allows engineers to see the underground anatomy of a city, locating forgotten tunnels, uncharted utility lines, and the precise boundaries between stable rock and dangerous, water-saturated soils. The true revolution, however, lies not in collecting this data, but in understanding it. This is where artificial intelligence enters the conversation. AI algorithms can process the colossal amounts of information from LIDAR, ground-penetrating radar, and historical records, searching for patterns that would take a human geologist a lifetime to find. These systems can learn to recognize the subtle precursors to disaster. They might analyze decades of satellite images and ground sensor data to identify areas where the land is imperceptibly starting to creep, predicting a landslide months or even years before it happens. They can correlate tiny shifts in the ground with rainfall patterns and groundwater extraction rates to forecast which neighborhoods are at highest risk for sinkholes. This is not crystal ball gazing, it is predictive analytics on a geological scale. This technological toolkit provides something our ancestors never had, a data-driven basis for the ancient wisdom of listening to the land. It translates the whispers of the soil into clear, actionable intelligence. We are no longer building in the dark, hoping the ground will support our ambitions. With these eyes into the earth, we can plan our cities not as impositions upon the landscape, but as intelligent integrations with it, finally marrying human ingenuity with the deep, silent logic of the planet. The same geological force can write two entirely different stories. In January 2010, the Earth shook with immense violence along the coast of Chile, unleashing an earthquake measuring 8.8 on the magnitude scale, one of the most powerful ever recorded. The energy released was so colossal it literally shifted the Earth's axis and shortened the length of a day. Yet, when the shaking stopped, the confirmed death toll stood at around 500 people. A tragedy, certainly, but not an annihilation. Just 1 month earlier, a less powerful earthquake, a magnitude 7.0, struck the island nation of Haiti. The energy released was about 500 times weaker than the Chilean quake, but the outcome was apocalyptic. An estimated 200,000 people lost their lives, and the capital city of Port-au-Prince was reduced to rubble. This staggering difference in destruction is the ultimate proof that a city's fate is not sealed by the ground it sits on, but by the wisdom it builds with. Chile sits on the volatile Pacific Ring of Fire. Its people and its government have lived with the reality of massive earthquakes for generations. This long, painful history forged a national culture of resilience. Chile implemented some of the world's most rigorous, geology-informed building codes. Their engineers are masters of seismic design, creating structures with reinforced concrete and flexible frames that are engineered to sway and absorb energy rather than collapse. Regular, mandatory drills ensure that even school children know exactly what to do when the ground begins to move. When the enormous quake struck, the system, though severely tested, worked as intended. Buildings swayed and were damaged, but they largely remained standing, giving people precious seconds to escape. The ground shook, but the human infrastructure had been designed to dance with it. Haiti's tragedy was written in a different kind of history. The nation, the poorest in the Western Hemisphere, lacked the resources for such sophisticated engineering. In Port-au-Prince, rapid, unplanned urban expansion had covered the landscape with densely packed, poorly constructed buildings. Concrete blocks were made with too much sand and too little cement. Rebar was thin or absent altogether. There were no foundations designed to handle tremors. The city was built on a geological foundation that amplified the shaking, and its man-made structures were like houses of cards. When the quake hit, these brittle buildings pancaked instantly, trapping thousands. The difference between 500 deaths and 200,000 is not a measure of the earthquake's power. It is the measure of a society's investment in listening to the whispers of the earth. Chile heard the warnings written in its tectonic faults and prepared accordingly. Haiti, constrained by poverty and political instability, could not. The secret of the soil is not a magic spell. It is a clear, physical language. It tells us where the ground will shake, how the water will flow, and what the land can bear. But that knowledge only saves those who are willing to learn its vocabulary and build by its rules. The unbreakable bond between city and soil is the oldest story we know, a narrative written not in words but in stone, water, and dirt. From the first riverbank settlements to the sinking megacities of today, our urban destiny has always been shaped by forces far older than any empire. The secrets of the soil are not a niche science, they are the foundational code of human civilization, a set of rules that we have ignored at our peril. Our future depends on ending the great divorce from the land that began with the Industrial Age. We must move from a relationship of domination to one of deep collaboration, blending the intuitive wisdom of ancient geomancers with the powerful predictive tools of modern science. The goal is not to conquer the ground, but to listen to it, to build cities that are adaptive, resilient, and truly integrated with the ecosystems that support them. The next great chapter of urban history will be authored by those who understand that our greatest strength lies not in defying the planet, but in respecting its profound and enduring power. The ground beneath your own city has a story to tell. What hidden forces of rock and water have shaped the place you call home? We would love to hear your observations and discoveries in the comments below.